Welcome to Barnyard Language, honest talk about running farms and raising families. We are Caite and Arlene, an Iowa sheep farmer and an Ontario dairy farmer, with 6 kids, 2 husbands, and a whole lot of chaos between us.
While this is a podcast for farm families, sometimes our content isn't for the whole family. So kick off your boots, reheat your coffee, and join us for some Barnyard Language.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Barnyard Language. Podcasts are weird because you could be listening to this the day it comes out, where there is a lot going on in the world and in the US in particular. But you could also be listening to this 6 months from now. So who knows what you're going to think about, what was happening in the end of January 2026 when you someday listen to this show, but it is what it is. So Caite and I already have recorded a little snippet about mostly Caite's thoughts on the state of the world, but now we're just going to go back into our usual what's happening in our worlds. And sometimes we have to remember that our world is also important. And, the things that we do every day are important to ourselves and our families and the livestock that we're taking care of and the land that we're caring for and all of that stuff. So, Caite, how are things on the farm? Excluding what's happening in the world.
Cold.
Yeah, same here.
Cold, real cold. And that's an excellent reminder, and I really hope that this situation in our country is dealt with in such a way that people listening to this 5 years from now will have to go to Google to have any idea what we're talking about. That is my deep hope. It is very, very cold. Our wind chills have been at like -40, -45 Fahrenheit. I don't know what that is in Celsius.
By the time it gets that cold, I think Fahrenheit and Celsius I eventually made up. I can't remember the number, but yeah.
Effing cold. It's cold enough that they're canceling school. We're in that 10 minutes outside is enough to cause permanent damage kind of cold. Impressively, our waters are staying pretty functional, knock on wood. No trees have exploded. We did actually get an exploding tree warning in our weather forecast the other day. No trees have exploded. So that's a real upside. It wasn't one I had ever seen before, but here we are.
I feel like that is not a warning I've ever heard before. We are both of the same age, and there has been cold weather every winter in my life, and I don't remember anyone ever warning me about exploding trees until this year.
I know I've heard trees breaking because it was too cold. I think maybe they just didn't used to warn people because they figured that people would know what it was.
Yeah, I guess. I think they're just ramping it up. Are they really exploding? I don't think they're splintering and like shrapnel's flying in all directions.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was questioning. Are we preparing to see huge oaks just vaporizing? Because not gonna lie, that would be pretty damn cool.
If a tree explodes in the forest and there's no one there to see it, did it really happen?
Exactly. Other than that, I found out this week that my children don't know what hockey is. So that's a thing. I was trying to watch some Stanley Cup playoffs. My kids didn't know what that game I was watching was. So that's kind of a...
We're really far from the playoffs, Caite. Real far from the playoffs.
Shit. Okay.
You were watching the NHL. That's okay.
Yeah.
That's months away.
Is it? God.
Yeah. Hockey goes for a long time.
This is the problem with listening to so much NASCAR, is that NASCAR starts in the end of February and ends in the beginning of November. The off season for racing is very short. So this sports ball calendar is very confusing to me.
Yeah. Your football is almost done, but the hockey will go on for a real long time.
Hockey goes on forever. That's, tides may come and go and civilizations may rise and crumble, but hockey,
yeah, is eternal.
Like this intro, goes on forever. It's real effing cold. Jim's generally beloved, but now I'm going to say jackass cousin went to Costa Rica for a week and a half and has been sending pictures while Jim is here doing his cousin's chores, feeding his goats, feeding his chickens. We're getting pictures from the beach. That's lovely. I'm so glad for them. I hope he gets a sunburn on his ass or his bald spot or both. Just gonna say it. Otherwise, things are good. How are things at your place, Arlene?
So, similarly cold. It seems like every week there's a new fun storm to throw, things in the mix that you weren't expecting, like lots of days off school. This week is the high school exams, so we're expecting a snowstorm, which will probably mean exam delays and bus cancellations and all that kind of stuff. So that just, keeps everybody guessing as to when they'll actually, how much they're studying on any given moment as to whether they're writing that exam or not. Last week, my husband and I went to Toronto for the Dairy Farmers of Ontario convention, which I think I maybe mentioned in our last update was going to happen. Well, it did, and it was fun. And we got to take the train, which was a nice way to avoid last week's storm. So that's good. And then this week, I'm actually going to Toronto again because I'm just love the city and, traveling in snowstorms because we're back to another one. And this one is we joined a co-op a couple of years ago, and so I decided to go on as a delegate. So that means I have to go to the annual meeting and attend some training sessions for that. So get to go stay at another Toronto hotel and fight the snow to get there and get home again. So it's meeting season. And apparently that means that if you live in Ontario, you go to Toronto. So all the city.
Speaking of school delays, I just got another one while we were recording. So my kids were out Monday for Martin Luther King Day, and Wednesday they had a 2-hour late start and then an early dismissal on top of it. I think they were probably on the bus longer than they were actually at school. They were off school Friday for the cold, and they got a late start tomorrow for the cold, which, again, I would deeply prefer that they keep kids and families and bus drivers safe. Like, I'm not knocking this decision making at all, but also I want these children out of my house.
Yeah, I don't remember maybe once that they ever canceled school for cold. It's usually just storms. But I'm grateful that our school doesn't. I know some school boards do around here, but ours doesn't do the delay thing. Like school's on or off because like waiting around to be like, is it 1 hour? Is it 2 hours? When are they going to go? When are they going to come back? I imagine that would be more infuriating than just saying it's a snow day. Like, figure it out.
I am glad on Wednesday that some friends gave me a heads up that the kids would be home 2 hours early, because I would have been real bummed if they had just shown up. And I mean, upside of having a school bus, they would have just shown up. So at least they wouldn't have been like abandoned somewhere.
Sure, but you could have not been home and then they would have come home to an empty house.
That would have been problematic. I mean, the bus driver went to school with Jim. He knows where my in-laws live.
Sure, yeah.
Anything else, Arlene?
I don't know. Now that people have the weather update from our houses in January, I think that's all they need to know.
I'm sure that was what people were really here for. So.
Yeah, that's right. All right, why don't we welcome our guest for this week?
Sounds good.
Our goal as podcasters is to create a program that makes you feel less alone as a farming, ranching, or homesteading parent, but we can't do it alone.
Supporting Barnyard Language on Patreon helps us cover production costs and ensures the future of the show, but you'll also gain access to exclusive perks and behind-the-scenes content.
Your support enables us to continue bringing you the thought-provoking conversations and inspiring stories week after week. So if you find value in what we're doing and want to be part of the Barnyard community, head over to patreon.com/Barnyard Language and choose a tier that suits you. Today, we are excited to be talking to Dr. Caite Lund, who's joining us from Washington. And Dr. Caite, we usually start our interviews, and often it's farmers, but we're going to use the same question for you as we do with everybody else because it applies to everyone. So we always start with, what are you growing? So usually our farmers are telling us about crops and livestock and all those types of things, but you can still tell us about kids and businesses and careers and personal growth, anything you want to talk about. So what are you growing?
Sure. Oh, yeah, that's a great question. I love it. And I love how it kind of crosses over domains. I'm growing a lot of things. I'm definitely working on growing my business, but really what I'm trying to grow is well-being. And I'm trying to grow that sort of across domains, my own well-being, trying to help foster it within the context of my family, my kids. We were just talking about, we have some kids who are applying to college, and these stressful processes that they go through, right? And how to help them foster their own sense of well-being and resilience as they go through these hard things. So that's one thing. Fitness is another big thing. I'm growing fitness in myself. I'm got this new strength training thing going on, which I'm really excited about. And finally have a new book out there, which I'm trying to grow in a sense in terms of how many people have it in their hands and just talking about the concepts and that sort of thing. So yeah, that's basically, I guess, how I would answer that growth question.
Anytime we talk to authors, it does sound like growing a book is a lot like the other things that we're growing, right? Because you put a lot of work into it and then put it out into the world and see where it ends up, and you kind of lose the control over it, but hope that it finds the right people. So, what brought you into the work that you're doing? And can you tell us a little bit about your work and your background?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So I'm a psychologist. I've been a psychologist for 20 plus years, working with families and kids primarily initially in the medical space, medical psychology, helping folks who are struggling with a medical diagnosis or physical challenge maximize their potential within their unique context or create a new sense of normal, that sort of thing. And I believe that I was really drawn towards this work as a psychologist, particularly initially in the medical domain, just sort of evolved over time to be more broad because we moved a lot with my husband's job. But I kind of got there, I think, based on my own early experiences as a kid. When I was 4, I was diagnosed with this medical condition called hydrocephalus, where the cerebral spinal fluid isn't circulating as it should, causing pressure to build up on the brain. And so the good news is that can be managed with something called a shunt, which is surgically implanted, circulates the fluid for you. Bad news is shunts tend to break, particularly in childhood. So it's in and out of the hospital, coming back to school, looking different, feeling different. And it was hard. Those days, those years were hard. I had a great support systems, fortunately, and my parents, parents of friends, teachers, helped me to focus on what I could do as opposed to what I couldn't do, and helped me to find a way to define my own context, which didn't really look like the context of my peers or my friends, and to be okay within that context and to kind of develop within that context and maximize my own unique potential. So I think those early experiences really have informed where I've gone with my career and, have shaped a lot of how I look at this idea of helping folks to move through and beyond challenge in a way that makes sense for them, because it's not going to look the same for all of us. And it's going to, in fact, look very different for all of us. So I guess that's a long story of how I got to this point.
I'd just like to, I guess, less of a question than a thing that I would really like to talk about is with things like disabilities or loss or that I feel like so much of what we see about building resilience in kids can be around small things, but it's so important for humans to learn about building resilience to things that won't, quote unquote, get better, or things where you're really dealing with that cyclical nature of dealing with grief and dealing with this is just the way things are. And how do we build an ability to still be fairly functional, happy, healthy humans in the world while not also, then bringing the toxic positivity to like, you just have to accept it. God wouldn't put it in front of you if he couldn't bring you through it or whatever, Oh, God, it's like I'm grinding my teeth just thinking about all this stuff that we say to people when honestly we just don't know what to say. And so I think our brains just panic and we're like, well, I got to say something. So God doesn't close a door, but he opens a window or, whatever non secular things you might have or whatever else. So I'm really interested to talk about how we build that longer term resilience and also remembering that resilience doesn't mean that it's healthy to keep pushing. You have to give things a chance to bounce back. I was thinking about things like trees or corn or any sort of materials or humans or whatever. They can go through an unimaginable amount of stress, but you have to give them time to recover or you can't expect them to keep popping back up. At some point, they're going to go down and they're going to stay there. And it's not a good idea. So that was a whole lot of not a question. Sorry.
That's a really, really good point. We always want to acknowledge the challenge and acknowledge what's happening within one's own unique context, hard or otherwise. But those hard things, sort of acknowledging those challenges and figuring out how to help folks manage and cope with whatever the challenge is within their context without defaulting to, as you say, this notion of toxic positivity, because that's definitely not what we want to do. We never want to minimize. We always want to try to understand as fully as we can what someone's experience is on a human level of whatever it is they're grappling with. And sometimes there isn't an easy answer to helping them forward, but over time and with exploration and some space, sometimes we can always identify what one is bringing in terms of strengths and opportunities and that sort of thing. And sometimes through exploration and discovery, we can help them find a way to use those things to move forward in a way that makes sense for them. But it's really coming back to understanding that experience on a human level. And I absolutely agree that it's not a good idea to keep pushing without taking space and time to reflect and understand what you feel like in time or space. Because we as humans have this tendency to just go, 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 go. And then we wonder why we're not really getting anywhere. And so that time, that step back, that reflection is really, really important, whether that means resting, shifting gears, doing something like a hobby or something we enjoy, whatever that looks like for us or whatever that looks like in a situation. It's a very, very important point. So thank you for making that.
So when we're talking about resilience, it feels like one of those terms that gets talked about a lot, but is a little bit hard for me to wrap my head around. And I know you've written a book both about resilient kids and resilient parents. So could you describe to us what a resilient parent looks like or what qualities they have and what a resilient child looks like? And then we'll kind of cover some of the ways that we can help ourselves and our kids to be those people.
Yeah, absolutely. So just kind of a broader look at the first book, Bounce, Help Your Child Build Resilience and Thrive in School, Sports, and Life, focuses on the 7 pillars of the resilient child. But the cool thing is those pillars apply to all of us across the lifespan. It just so happens that the book is written through the lens of the elementary school child, because my kids were in elementary school at the time. And, I was kind of seeing things as a parent, seeing things as a psychologist, and then had my own early experiences to draw in. The new book, Step Away, The Keys to Resilient Parenting, is written through the lens of a parent and what makes a resilient parent. The pillars, the things written about in the book also apply really to all of us across the lifespan. So just wanted to kind of put that out there. But in terms of what a resilient parent looks like specifically, and then we can talk about kids, but it all morphs together. I'm looking at resilience in this context as sort of a lifestyle. How are we integrating strategies and tools, and how are we living that allows us to become as resilient as possible, to optimize our well-being within our own unique context, which helps us then meet challenge, overcome challenge, because challenge is inevitably going to come up. So the first thing that I talk about in this book is the importance of us as parents, for everybody, to manage our stress response so that we're showing up as level as possible every day. Not always easy, but what we don't want is we don't want to be starting our days up here such that when challenge hits, we escalate to the point of shutdown, and then we're not really able to show up for ourselves or our families, our kids, or whoever that we're in contact with. So I always work with folks on managing their stress response. And then a resilient parent is one who is able to care for themselves, optimize their own sense of well-being as a way of being able to be more present for their children, for their families. So it's kind of like you're stepping away in order to step in. And that looks like managing your stress response consistently, connecting with social supports, and having the community support or whatever types of support are going to help you function best in play, participating in hobbies or having some lens on joy each and every day, because that's something that we can miss, right? We can be moving through time and space so fast that we forget to laugh. We forget what actually does make us happy. So getting in touch with those things, super important. We also talk a lot about emotional intelligence and parenting and sort of being aware of our own way of interacting with other people, interacting with our kids in particular, and how that impacts them and how their way of interacting with us impacts us. And really, that perspective and that understanding is so important and informs so much about how we parent. So, we talk a lot about that. But really, it comes down to creating that foundation of well being so that we can show up in our most robust way for our kids and our families.
I find it fascinating how you were talking about being resilient so that we're not starting each day already ratcheted up to 90 or whatever. And I know for myself, I think so much of resilience is being resilient in the faces of external things, a job problem or a spouse or a friend or markets or whatever. And the idea of giving yourself grace to be resilient for your own failings and realizing I had a situation with our daughter the other day where I was already managing so much of my own not reacting the way I grew up being taught to react to her situation that I was not easily able to see the actual problem because I was using, 90% of my energy on managing myself instead of being able to use 90% of my energy on managing her situation. And being able to just be resilient in the face of that and just sort of step back and go, but hey, I was able to see that I was using my energy for this and not just failing at being a parent. I will say too, when I came into the studio and you and Arlene were talking about helping your bigger kids apply for colleges, and I was thinking about the little kids, little problems, big kids, big problems, because my kids are 7 and almost 9. And so the problems that we're being resilient in the face of are mean friends, lunches we don't like at schools, a pet dying, that sort of much less things with a lot fewer moving parts to navigate than college. I mean, lunch we don't like is a pretty straightforward problem. College applications sound less straightforward, just from what I heard from the two of you. So it's nice to think about getting practice with building resilience for the whole family.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And it's interesting because I think that the problems that you're mentioning for your 7 and 9-year-olds, it's like, those are big in the moment, right? And I actually was reflecting the other day about this very thing, like, we're grappling with this chaos of the college thing and like what's coming next and all of that. But when you're in those 7 and 9-year-old problems, those are significant, those are big. So it's a developmental trajectory, right? And so things do change, things do evolve. But I remember those days of, mean friends. And one of my boys is very much sort of socially, emotionally evolved, sort of beyond his age. The most 8-year-old boys were like, where's the football? I'm happy. But he really wanted to understand why some kids were mean and why did they say those mean things and why are they so mean when I'm wearing the wrong football jersey because this team I really like and why can't I like a different team and all of that stuff. And so you really, as you're grappling with those issues at 7 and 9, you're setting a really important foundation for moving forward to the rest of the challenges that will come up on the developmental continuum.
Well, and at least for myself, I find it such a challenge to deal with because I know that this is how they learn how to be resilient in the face of bigger, quote unquote, more important things. But also, you can't really just tell them that that kid's a little shit. And I mean, I guess you could. I feel like it would be frowned upon in most places. There's that having to practice that being able to explain potential causes for someone else's behavior without giving them free rein to do it, being able to say, maybe this is why your classmate is reacting this way without saying, and it's totally fine and you should let them walk all over you. Because I actually mentioned to a teacher friend the other day that I had no idea how often I might want to chuck something at somebody else's small child until I had small children and had to hear about the shit that they do to each other. Because, I mean, obviously, I'm not going to throw something at a kid, especially not someone else's kid. But I had no idea how strong that mama bear urge of don't mess with my child would be. And to the practice of taking their concerns seriously, even when it doesn't feel that serious in the scope of everything else in the world. And I feel like that doesn't go away. You know, I mean, that's just, there's always something worse down the pike. I'm going to stop talking because this doesn't feel like it's getting better.
Well, it's hard. It's so hard to help our kids navigate these difficult social situations, right? And I think that that authentic communication between us and our kids when those come up is really important. Sort of validating that it doesn't feel good, validating that it's hard, helping them to see the strengths that they have that they're bringing to the mix and the table, but also, yeah, reinforcing that we sadly it's really hard to change the attitudes and behaviors of another person and to help them navigate through it from the inside out is a process. And I'm not sure that we had all the answers here. I'm sure that we didn't, as a matter of fact. But the truth is, we all do the best we can to help our kids navigate those situations. And it's just really important to acknowledge their feelings about them and help them from that point, as opposed to minimizing or something along those lines, which doesn't, I mean, you're not obviously doing that, but it's just really important to start from that foundation of trying to understand what the experience is and going from there.
This is bad since I just said that sometimes I want to throw stuff at other people's children. How can we avoid borrowing too much of our kids' stress on ourselves? Because I feel like, listening to you two talking about college applications or little kids with friend groups or whatever, there is a limit to how much you can take your kids' stress on yourself and still be healthy. And sometimes it's easier because when it's, my kids saying, well, I don't like school lasagna or whatever, like that's a pretty, like, all right, okay, cool. When it's, how hard do you push your kid to get their college applications done, and how much do you try to guide their decisions for things, and how do you make them understand that it's important while also not putting too much pressure of, but if you make the wrong choice, it's probably going to ruin the rest of your life, but not really because it's not really that important, but also it's really important.
Really important question. And a really hard question, right? Because I don't think there are any easy answers. I do know though that, and Arlene, I don't know how you feel about this, but I definitely feel stressed for my child as he's going through this process. And there are all these little nuances and details and things. And we're very lucky. I mean, he's very engaged and he's doing the work. But there's so many variables outside of his control, outside of our control for sure. Like all of it's outside of our control. I mean, we can guide and project manage. When I told him I was coming on board as the project manager so that none of those deadlines were missed.
Can I make a spreadsheet for you?
Yeah, right. And he's obviously going to write all his own stuff, but there's all this other stuff that's out there with institutional requirements and how these decisions are made, and regardless of how a kid is presenting and all these things. So the decisions really do fall outside of everybody's control at a certain point. They can do their very, very best. But I think that stress ratchets up when you worry about, well, what if they don't get into where they really, really want to go? Or what if they don't get in? You know what I mean? So I don't know. I'm working on that. And I think it does come down to really help as parents modulating that stress response, optimizing our own well-being as best we can so that we're able to navigate these harder moments, because it at least for me, from my vantage point, is feeling a bit intense on that college front.
I think too, so much of it is about being able to empathize, and at least with my younger kids, showing them that I understand the part of it they're really struggling with, because I could solve my kid not having what she wants for lunch, but I can't and shouldn't make sure that she never gets presented with a food item that she doesn't immediately want ever again. It's unhealthy and weird to be like, "I will take care of everything for you." And I think that reminder that we can empathize with our child's struggle or our spouse's struggle or whoever without I'm a fixer. I'm a big time Midwestern Irish Catholic raised mom. I will fix it and then I will feed you. Or I will feed you and then I will fix it. Or if I could fix it by feeding you, that would be perfect, you know? And so just having to know that what we can do actively in the moment is to empathize with the fact that they're struggling with this thing without we can, I think, take on some of the weight of the struggle without taking on the weight of the thing they're struggling with.
Yeah, yeah, it's sort of acknowledge.
This is why I don't write books, because my book would end like 6 pages in and I'd just be like, I don't know. It's a pamphlet. You can have it for free.
Yeah, it's that acknowledgement of the struggle. And sometimes we have to step in and help guide and such a little bit. But sometimes it's really important to let the child, yeah, experience that lunch that they don't like or what have you, because if you're swooping in to take that experience away, it's going to be a lot harder to manage through the next similar type of challenge that comes up, and then really hard to manage through the bigger challenges that come up. So I think that's a really good point that you're making. But acknowledging on a human level, like, oh, yeah, that's a bummer. That's hard when you don't like lunch and you're hungry at the end of the day, is an important acknowledgement for sure.
When things within the family are stressful because of bigger forces, I'm thinking this year, like the markets are not great for crops. There are going to be a lot of families who are struggling. I know we had both combination of drought and lower crop yields and lower crop prices, which makes things really stressful. How do we both be honest with our kids, but not put our stress on them, especially when we're talking about families are farming together and the kids are often involved in all the steps of the process, and when things go well, we want to share those things, but then you can also put a lot of work into something and have it not turn out well. So what are some ways that we can kind of share to an appropriate amount the reality of the situation, but not let it get us and our kids down in the process?
Yeah, yeah, I gotcha. That's a really good question. And so starts again with us, the parents, managing our own stress response so that we're showing up level and even. And then it's a developmentally appropriate lens that we want to be sharing things through. So sounds like, the kids are going to be involved, of course, in the entire process, but developmentally, in a developmentally appropriate way, sharing the wins and the struggles and that sort of thing. And also within the context of the struggles, there can also be positives, not to put this in the context of like positive, toxic positivity or anything like that, but I think it is a benefit to, as a family, think about the things that are going well despite the challenges, that whole piece, because that really does help us to neutralize our lens. Obviously, we need to be working through, we need to be acknowledging, contending with the challenges as they come up. Everyone needs to be aware of them in a developmentally appropriate way. But sometimes, if we're only focusing on the challenges or the bad stuff, then we kind of shut ourselves down. So if we can look at the end of each day for 3 to 5 things that are going well within the context of the bigger picture or even what's hard, that's going to be really helpful for all of us, for the mindset of everyone to move forward despite the challenges at hand. Because it's true, it's a hard time out there. And how to communicate the realities of that with our kids in farming or otherwise is really, really important, striking that balance. And depends a lot on that developmental lens that we're speaking through, but it's also trying to optimize our well-being in a way that's possible within that, and then being as honest and upfront as we can.
I think, Dr. Kate, I really like what you just said about acknowledging the hard things and then also looking for positives on top of it. I was telling my daughter the other day about this. She has this classmate who is a good kid. She's just really not doing some of her best work at being a good friend. Let's put it that way. And I was, because I'm a pretty sciencey, active kind of a person. I like to break things down and slot them away. And I was telling my daughter that maybe we could think of it as diluting her influence on their friend group. When it's only 3 of you, she's a lot of that friend group. But if there were 8 of you, she'd only be a littler part. And I think maybe we can look at these, especially the bigger hard things, the same way that finding more positive things isn't getting rid of the bad thing, but it is diluting how much of our life is taken up by that bad thing. And sometimes maybe we have to put more effort into finding good things to dilute that bad thing. But I mean, what I told my daughter too is that when you make lemonade, you can't leave out the lemons because then all you have is nasty sugar water. You have to have the sour parts because it does add things. And this little girl has a lot of very good qualities. She's just kind of a lot. And I think that just transfers into bigger and bigger struggles as they get older. And thinking to what Arlene was saying about, farming with it being the whole family, is that a lot of times we're working. Arlene and I both farm with our in-laws. We live in small communities where markets tanking means it's bad for the whole community. Businesses will close, people will move. It's not one family losing a job. It's everybody, or it can be everybody. And I think that does bring a very different degree of seriousness to some of these things that farm kids see, or more likely to see. It's
Yeah, absolutely. Really, really, really fascinating and important point.
So I was looking at the 7 pillars that you have in your Resilient Children book. I'm just going to read them out. And there was one in particular. We've kind of already talked about one, but there's another one that I was wondering about. So the 7 pillars are tolerating frustration and managing emotions, navigating friendships and social pressures, sustaining focus on a single task and larger goal. Some of us need work on that at all times, right? You said these are for kids and adults. Developing courage, building motivation, building confidence, and creating optimism. So, I mean, we can't cover all of them, but the one that I feel like we've talked about tolerating frustration and emotions at this point. But the other one I was wondering about is the building motivation piece. A lot of our guests talk about farm life as a great way to build responsibility and those types of things. And a lot of us, our kids have chores that they have to do. But in the motivation side, when and how do we start stepping back and letting our kids create that motivation themselves, or look around and see, oh, there's another job that I could do while I'm here, rather than just I go out and do this single task and then I'm done. So the motivation piece of things.
Yeah, no, that's a really important question. There's a developmental lens there too, right? And so when kids are younger, we motivate them more so extrinsically, right? By having chores and things they have to complete and that sort of thing. Over time, we're hoping that they develop their own set of interests, passions, a sense of agency, which is going to shift that sense of motivation from primarily driven extrinsically to more of an intrinsic motivation, because they're doing something because they truly love it, whether that's a sport or a hobby or what have you. But in the case of working on the farms, they feel an attachment, they feel a sense of pride, a sense of belonging within the whole picture. Like what they're doing in terms of their chore or their contribution is really meaningful in the success of the farm and moving things forward. And so that's what we hope, that kind of is internalized over time by parents coming in and praising the efforts and kind of pointing out the things that are happening because of what the kid is doing and that sort of thing. So that the child really becomes driven from the inside out to make this contribution, to help this thing work, to benefit the greater good of the family, the community, the farm, that whole thing. So that's what we like to see in terms of how we help kids develop their motivation over time. And ultimately, we need to be motivated from the inside out to really make the biggest difference for ourselves and for other people.
Well, Dr. Caite, I feel like I can't be mad about Arlene's laughing about the sustaining focus on a single task and a larger goal, especially because things like ADHD tend to run in families. And once you already have the neurodivergent family that you have, you're kind of stuck with them. And I mean that in the best possible way. How do we help our kids build these pillars when we ourselves are perhaps slightly not so great at some of these pillars ourselves?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And the reality is, we're all going to have our strengths and we're all going to have our relative challenges. And so acknowledging those and starting from that place is really important, kind of knowing where our own struggles are as parents and how that might impact our kids in one way or another. But it's really a question of starting from where you are in terms of helping your kids, or starting from where we are and helping our kids develop these things, and understanding who our kids are and where they are in time and space and what their challenges are, strengths are, and how we might be able to move forward. So I guess the long and the short of it, it's okay to start from wherever you are, as long as you know yourself and know what you need to be at your best, to pass that along to your child to help them develop, and knowing that you're doing the best you can, because we've all got a different context and we've all got a different way of doing things, and there's no one size fits all. I guess that's the important piece to mention here. In any of these pillars, we really help people to integrate them in a way that makes sense for them.
The term emotional intelligence is something that you brought up earlier. And it's one of those things I think that kind of like resilience gets talked about a lot, but is a little bit hard to identify. So, what are some of the key elements to being emotionally intelligent, fostering it in our kids, improving it in ourselves, those types of things? So, what is it and how can we do better?
Yeah, gotcha. So emotional intelligence is how we're understanding ourselves, our own emotional state, and being able to recognize how our own emotional state in any given moment shows up in the world and impacts other people. So that's really the core of it, right? And so emotional intelligence is this ability to see this in ourselves and others. And emotional competence is our ability to actually make changes if they're necessary, and create a greater ability or sense of emotional control in ourselves, and help our children to do the same. So, modulating emotions and doing that in a way that allows us to be at our best and allows our kids to be at our best. So, it's really about understanding and then putting into action.
So Katie's kind of already touched on it, but when it comes to the things like bullying, navigating friendships, especially, I say in young children, but it happens all the way through our lives. We're all navigating friendships and relationships all the time. So, what are some of the skills that we can be trying to model or support in our kids or improve in ourselves, same as before, to help us with those relationships and to work out the complexities of how to interact with other humans?
Yeah, it's super hard sometimes, right? And I think the most important message that we can give our kids is this idea of leading with kindness and accepting and appreciating individual difference within ourselves and within other people. I think that's really a vital foundation, a vital starting point for us all. And however that evolves will look different for different kids and different families and that sort of thing. But encouraging our kids to help another kid out on the playground when they're struggling, trying to foster and encourage conversations about what they're noticing at school and what they're noticing in their friends, particularly if there's a struggle happening, that sort of thing. So I think helping our kids to build that foundation is really, really vital. And I remember, I think a lot of this pillar comes from my own observations of my one son, who was socially, emotionally very evolved at 8, wanted much more conversation than just having the football, and would get pushed around a lot because he was wearing the wrong football jersey. And it really hurt him. It was challenging for him. And so at home, we would have lots of conversations about how, yeah, sort of acknowledging how that felt. Like, yeah, that's a really hard situation. That doesn't feel good. And then in a developmentally appropriate way, maybe me sharing a little bit about what it was like for me at 8 to be skating with my classmates wearing this giant helmet with these huge glasses before helmets were cool, when you were skating. None of the kids wore helmets, but I was wearing a helmet because I couldn't hit my head. And it was hard as all the kids were laughing as I was skating by, trying to do my best on the ice. And I think sharing that story with him in a developmentally appropriate way when he was 5 or 6 or 7 was helpful in sort of his ability to see that, okay, wow, but it's possible to move forward from those hard moments. But at the same time, it's really important to be kind in those situations, but yet we can't force kindness from other people. So it's that idea of not being able to change the attitudes and behaviors of other people, and then helping him to see his strengths in that situation. And maybe you'll have a lot of power if you just walk away. And how might that feel? And so experimenting with those kinds of things, having the discussion, and then having him actually do it the next day on the playground, walk away, and beginning to feel more confident and more powerful in that because he doesn't have to hold on to those words, kind of a thing. So it's just meeting our kids where they are, engaging in conversation in a developmentally appropriate way, sharing authentically as a parent in terms of the places where you may have struggled and how you were able to move forward or whatever, because it's really important for our kids to know that there were points where we struggled as well. We're not these like struggle-free people. So it's a combination of all those things to set the foundation for moving forward in life, because as we know, hard situations with people are going to come up, and not everybody is wired to be kind. And that's really an unfortunate reality, but we have to kind of navigate that as we go along.
I think it seems like, as an adult who's kind of found those other kids with the helmets and the big glasses, as it were, that getting them to that place where they can arrive in their own, at least in our family, little weirdo space, fairly unscathed and generous and kind. And I worry about the kids who never get made fun of, because it's going to be a real hard crash when something does happen. I mean, my kids bounce pretty good already because they've run into stuff. But when you meet those people who are like, high school is the best years of my life, I'm like, oh, that's going to be bad, because eventually something is going to happen. That's just the way the world works. But it is such a nice sense of community when you find the other kids who struggled with the same sort of stuff that you did as a kid, and you're like, oh, your parents sent you with weird hippie lunches too to a small town school and bought all your clothes from the boys section at the farm store. I bet you were real popular. Not bringing out any of my childhood trauma at all.
Think too that sharing those stories with our kids, but not in a way that's like, I had it worse, but on that level of connection, right?
Yes, it's the level of connection. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sharing this because I want to connect with you and I want you to understand who I am and things that I've come through, not to prove, well, everybody's got it hard and you just got to power on, right? That you're actually trying to you're trying to relate to them. Yeah.
It's that connection piece. It's the relating to piece, and showing them it's possible to just, you don't even have to say it, just it's possible to shift into a different place. But I totally agree with this notion of, yeah, folks who have it so easy all the way through, something will happen. And so it's not a bad thing to move through and beyond, experience challenges early on, move through and beyond them as a foundation for how you're going to deal with challenges later, because they're inevitably going to come up all the time. And really important point. Thank you for making that.
So while we're talking about bullying real quick, my kids' school, and I know a lot of other schools, are getting very proactive about talking about bullying and bullying prevention and bullying awareness. And that's amazing. Like, absolutely do not get me wrong. I 100% back teaching kids to be more aware of bullying, and adults for that matter. But my kids, at least, being who they are and what I've seen from some of the other 7 and 8-year-old crowd, now if one of them accidentally sits on the other one's foot on the couch, the one will yell about how the other one is bullying them. Or if one takes the other one's glass, or the dog steps on somebody, or like any negative thing that happens between any more than one children gets yelled about being bullying just from the kids. And I don't know how to explain where the line is of what's bad and what's just sometimes people are jerks accidentally and sometimes people are jerks on purpose, but they're still not bullying you, they're just being jerks, versus that more targeted ongoing situation that I think is kind of the what draws the line between being a jerk and bullying. So I'm wondering how do I explain this to my kids? Can I just have them call you? Maybe you can
Well,
just talk them
it's a
through
really
it?
good question,
'Cause
but I really like the way you just explained it, actually, in a way that using developmentally appropriate language or whatever, in a way that your child will understand. I think the way you just explained it is quite effective in terms of sometimes things happen, sometimes it's not intentional, but sometimes it is, and it's more targeted and ongoing, and kind of knowing how to differentiate, because every time something happens, like someone spills a glass of water and part of it hits us or whatever, sometimes there can be things that just happen, or like when somebody sits on your foot on the couch, it might not be on purpose. So it's a question of discerning and differentiating through discussion and understanding. But I like how you described it, and I think that would work really well to talk to your kids in that way.
looking at how much damage has occurred in our generation and generations before, and still, I guess, of both sides of that, how many of us grew up with, oh, that boy pulls your hair because he likes you. That's not fair to the kid who's getting their hair pulled, because that's a dick way to show that you're interested in somebody. And it's not fair to the kid who's doing the hair pulling, because you're teaching them that being aggressive is a good way to get someone's attention, and it's not. And trying to make sure that we're not just coming up with whatever the next version of that is to teach our kids. But also, I'm just really sick of hearing about how the dog is bullying my kids by looking at them or wanting pets or, whatever.
That
It's just a
term
lot.
can be triggering for us, though, because we know that it has a bigger context, but they're just treating it as someone did something mean to me, and so I'm going to call it that, right? Like this is the vocabulary that they have. So it's sometimes it's our thing. That term feels bigger.
No, Arlene, I'm totally evolved and totally done with therapy and totally fine with everything. I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, no, I'm great. So, Dr. Kate, we often ask our guests to reflect on the time when they first became parents because it's a big change. What comes to mind when you think about that time and what those first weeks and months are like? And where were you in sort of your professional journey? How enlightened were you before you had kids? Were you already prepared?
Well, no, I don't think you're ever really prepared. So we had a lot of change and moving and chaos going on right when the boys were born. The boys were born, and I had just finished up my fellowship training in Boston and had plans to continue that on after 6 months. But then all of a sudden, we were moving to Connecticut. And then I was there with the boys as infants, and my husband was transferred to another state. And anyway, was only home on the weekends. So it was a crazy couple first years. The first couple of years were crazy, but we did what we had to do to keep things as level as possible. but I definitely was not focused on my own well-being. I was much more focused on the boys' well-being. And that definitely, I paid a little bit of a price for that, but eventually I restruck the balance. We moved a lot in their first couple of years with my husband's job. And so my career had to take a little bit of a back seat for a minute. And then I got it back online in much more of a portable, flexible type of way, which has been a really nice balance such that I could be as present and available for them as possible in their first, let's say, 18 years. But yeah, those first years were a little bit crazy. But we also, I will say, had fun. I had this big double bob stroller, and every morning we'd jump in the car and I'd put the stroller in the car and we'd take the dog out and we'd spend the morning walking around this neighboring town. They knew me by name at Starbucks. They knew us by name at the bookstore. So yeah, I mean, we tried to do that, but there were moments when it was not totally easy, but it was what it was, and we did the best we could. And I think that's the important thing. You do the best you can in the situation or context that you're in.
What did your approach to, I mean, your work changed because of a variety of factors, but how did you think about your work and the way your career has gone as a parent? Has being a parent, you mentioned that your book about children was influenced by the life stage that your kids were at. So, in what other ways has parenthood influenced your career and the things that you've been interested in?
Well, I think that, step away definitely is a product of that, because as a parent myself and watching what my parent friends are going through at times, watching what my clients are going through, the fact that many of my clients are parents struggling with some of these issues, that's definitely one piece that's informed it. And it's definitely created, I think, more of an interest in, or more of a flexible, because I've kept things quite portable and flexible, and it's given me the space to develop and evolve in new niches and that sort of thing. So I work with a lot of adolescent athletes, for example, helping them to build resilience and overcome performance blocks on the field. And I think that also is something that evolved as a result of me as a parent on the sidelines watching a lot of this stuff unfold. And then a lot of good synergy with clients who have kids who are also in youth sports and that sort of thing. So I think there's definitely some strong overlap in all of it, for sure.
So, Dr. Caite, one thing I'm really enjoying as a parent and the newer generation. I don't know, what are we? It feels like so many of the parenting materials and things that were out previously were very specifically, I'm thinking like the Dr. Spock manual. Old white dude tells you about how he already knows everything about everything, and every kid is the same, and every parent is the same. And if you follow his 27-step plan, your child will probably be okay, unless you ruin them. And I'm enjoying how many of the things that are out there now are more, none of us know really what's going on, but we're all doing our best, and here's a book that might help you get through at least a little bit of it. But I'm wondering if you struggle with imposter syndrome what happens when you have a really shitty day and don't want to just throw a tantrum and refuse to eat lasagna and yell about how everyone's bullying you. Or, I mean, do you just do it? Because, like, no judgment here, you know?
Yeah, it's not easy because everyone encounters those hard days, right? And I think it comes down to you do the best you can within your own unique context. And you make a really good point, because the perhaps earlier stuff, maybe Dr. Spock, you have to follow the specific 27 steps because everyone is the same. And the fact is, everyone's not the same, right? And there's no one size fits all in any of this. And it comes back to keeping yourself as level as possible, doing the best you can with the time and the resources and other stuff that you have in a given moment or at a given time, and just moving forward from that point.
We often ask our guests about giving parenting advice. And I mean, obviously, you've written entire books, so this feels like a loaded question. But say you were invited to a baby shower and you have to share one piece of parenting advice. What's your one that is the top of your list?
Yeah, so the top of my list for that would be believe in the possibility for yourself and your kids. The possibility on the other side of the challenges that are inevitably going to come up, but keep your eye on the possibility at the same time.
Now I just need to know, do you gift your own books at baby showers?
I, to be really frank with you, haven't been to a baby shower in a really, really long time. So I don't actually, not because I don't want to, but because I haven't been to one.
It seems like maybe it's not the done thing anyway. I don't know. Maybe if you made picture books instead of advice books, it would feel different.
I do have a picture book on my about my dog, Putter in the Red Car.
Well, you could totally gift that one, I think. I think that would be. So we ask all of our guests, if you were going to dominate a category at the county fair, what would it be? And categories can be real or made up to ensure that you win.
So would I be in the category, or would I be like bringing some?
You're you're either entering a thing or you're creating a category of some kind that you know that you could win. So it is wide open to whatever skills you have.
Gotcha. I'm not sure. Well, I guess I could win if I learned how to do it, but I would love to bring the prize pig.
Hmm.
I would like to bring the pig to the fair.
Were you a Charlotte's Web fan as a kid?
Yes. As long as nothing happens to the pig, but yes, it's going to happen to the pig, right?
Oh no, definitely not. So we'll move into our cussing and discussing segment. If you, as a listener, would like to submit yours, you can go to our SpeakPipe, speakpipe.com/barnyard language, leave us a voice memo or send us an email at barnyardlanguage@gmail.com and we will read it out for you. Katie, what do you have to cuss and or discuss this week?
So, Arlene, even for me, this feels like a pretty random and strange one, but this is where we are. So, the fall allergies have been real bad. It's November 4th as we're recording this. The allergies have been real bad. The colds are all going around. God knows what else is out there. That dingle-donger at the space between your mouth and your throat, the thing that keeps you from like choking to death on your own spit or whatever. I know it's important. It must do something, right? It has to. It can't just be there to be a pain in the ass. But when you get respiratory stuff, and then like it gets all inflamed and it gets all sore, and then it's just back there just being annoying. Like, I am drinking so much tea and gargling so much salt water, and like, I'm not sick, but my throat dingle dongler hurts and is unhappy. And it's like having a rock in your shoe, except in your throat. Hopefully, doing something important because God knows. And if it's just chilling there to being annoying, I'm going to be really sad about it. I mean, not like really sad because it's a throat dingle dongler, and in the general scheme of the world, it seems pretty minor.
I love that this is your cussing and discussing the week we have a doctor with us.
Anyway, Dr. Kate, what do you have to cuss and discuss today?
Goodness. I think just the fact that there's so much going on and it's coming at us from all directions at all times, it feels like. And wanting to, I don't know, have a space of tranquility and feeling like, I'm not buried in the chaos, I think is what I would love to have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Arlene, what do you have to cuss and discuss?
So mine is a positive one today. Like Katie said, it's early November when we're recording, and we're just on the heels of Halloween. And so I have 4 kids, and just my youngest is still of a trick-or-treating age. And I was just reflecting on the fact that Halloween is just like the best. I don't like that as a culture, as communities, we have decided that we're gonna dress up, our kids are gonna go door to door, and we're gonna give them candy. Like, can there be it's just an incredible, weird tradition, but it's just so delightful in so many ways, like walking around the streets. And it was miserable this year. I will say it was cold, it was rainy, my hands were freezing.
I heard my kid at one point say to his friend who we were out with, "It feels like I'm crying, but it's just the water dripping off my forehead," because it was just like rain and just barely above freezing. But still just the fun of seeing, kids from toddlers to teens out just running around the streets and having fun and people decorating their houses. And I just think that in all the bad, I just love that there's still one of those traditions that the community can go all out and be like, here's a thing that we're all going to do because kids like it. And let's just keep that tradition going. So it doesn't make, does, I mean, it's a lot of our holiday traditions don't make sense. But in particular, Halloween is a weird one, but it's just so cute.
It feels to me, Arlene, like those little positive things like Halloween are kind of like the power boost to help us get through all the crap that is going on, because humans can be such god awful monsters, but sometimes we dress up in really weird costumes, go to random people's houses and demand food, and then they just give it to us.
Yeah. With a smile on their faces. They love it.
And every year, somewhere in my social media, it pops up about the carved turnips from Ireland from the 1800s and how absolutely terrifying they are. And some part of it that people were just like, what if we got this root vegetable and then made it really, really scary? That'd be fun. Like, what are humans anyway? We're weird.
Yeah, that's really really funny. Yeah, that's good. And I think yeah, those moments that you mentioned, that's joy, right? You're having fun, and that's really important and something that we can so easily overlook, at points.
When I think, Dr. Kate, it's so important to remember that experiencing joy and enjoying the joy does not mean that it does not in any way negate all the hard things. Because I think there can be such a sense that you're not being a serious adult who's worried about the world if you take a moment to laugh about all the funny stuff that is happening.
Oh, I think it's vital, right? It's just unfortunate that sometimes we overlook it. But yeah, no, it's vital, and it's only going to strengthen our resilience if we're able to do that. So I think it's a great reminder.
We could just have Halloween once a month or something. If it could be like this year, not a Friday night, though, that would be ideal. It is a lot easier as a parent when you don't have to be looking at the time and wondering when your kid's going to eventually fall asleep and if they have to go to school the next day on the sugar crash. But yeah, it is.
I will say, Arlene, our town also moved it an hour earlier this year, so all of it was before it got really dark out, and that was so much nicer.
And it was the time change weekend anyway.
Yeah, unless somebody's gonna get hit by a car, then it is when it gets real dark out and you've got little kids running all over the place.
Yeah, that's right. So we want to thank you so much, Dr. Kate, for joining us today. Can you tell our listeners where they can find you online, where they can buy your books, and where they can connect with you?
Sure, absolutely. So, best thing is my website, which is www.caitelundspeaks.com. And so that's a great place to go. I'm also very active on Instagram, which is, I think, Dr._Caite_Lund on Instagram. And then also LinkedIn is great. And books can be through my website or on Amazon. So all the places.
Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. This has been fun.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us on Barnyard Language. If you enjoy the show, please support us on Patreon with a donation.
Big thanks go out to our show editor, Krista Paffrath at the Rural Podcast Network.
Please rate and review the podcast wherever you listen and follow the show so you never miss an episode.
If you want to connect with other farming families, join the private Barnyard Language Facebook group.
We are always in search of future guests for the podcast. If you or someone you know would like to chat with us, get in touch.